Hello, beautiful people. How are you doing? This time, in the science lecture video number 6, we're not going to take any new lesson. We are just going to review all what we've learned before about plants' growth and reproduction. Plants are living organisms. They grow, they need food, they need water, and they reproduce. They make new copies of themselves. How do plants reproduce? We saw that there are two ways of plant reproduction. Some plants reproduce by making seeds. Some others reproduce by making spores. That's right. There are two groups of plants that reproduce by seeds. The first one, the flowering plants. Flowering plants are plants that grow seeds in their flowers. The second group of seed plants are conifers. Conifers are plants that grow seeds in their cones. Since they do not grow flowers, they use their cones to reproduce. Mosses and ferns are kinds of plants that reproduce by spores. Are fungi non-seed plants? Are fungi seed plants? Fungi aren't plants in the first place. Fungi are not plants. So we're not talking here about a plant reproduction. Fungi use spores to reproduce, but they are not plants. The first lesson in this chapter is about flowering plants. Flowering plants are plants that carry flowers, and flowers have various shapes and colors. I will use this flowers diagram to talk about different flowers parts and their function, their role in the plant's reproduction. Let me start with the petals. Petals are the colored parts of a flower. They have beautiful and different colors, and they have beautiful smells to attract pollinators to the plant, such as bees, butterflies, bats, and other animals. These are the sepals. Sepals look like leaves, and they are important since they protect the flower as it's growing. Here is the anther. The anther's function is to produce pollen grain, and the filament holds the anther. The stigma is the sticky place that receives pollen grains. The style, the ovary. Inside the ovary we have the ovules. The anther and the filament together build the male reproductive organ, which is the stamen, while the stigma, the style, and the ovary make the female reproductive organ called the pistil or the carpel. Since both organs, the male reproductive organ and the female reproductive organ, are shown in one flower, we can classify the flower as a perfect flower. How does reproduction happen? It starts with a pollinator. A pollinator must move pollen grains from the male anther to the female stigma inside the same flower or to another flower in the same species. So the pollinator carries pollen grains from the male anther to the female stigma. This step or this process is called pollination. So during pollination, pollen grains are moved from the anther to the stigma. Pollen grains then move to the ovary where they meet the female eggs and become seeds. Sometimes in plants that grow fruits, the flower becomes a fruit. This process is called fructification. It's fun time. Let's label the parts of a flower together. This is a petal. This part is the stigma. After the stigma, we have the style. Okay, this one, anther, sepal, and here are the ovules.
Bravo! Well done! You have completed this game.
Great! Here is another game. So they're saying most plants reproduce with the help of flowers. Let's help them name each part of the flower below. Part 1. This is part 1. It's a sticky part that pollen sticks to. What do you think? Is it the anther, ovule, or stigma? We're talking about part 1. It's the stigma, correct. So, stigma is the sticky part of the pistil that pollen sticks to. What about part 2, which is a long outgrowth of the ovary that collects pollen from the stamens? What about 2? Number 2. Is number 2 pointing to the pistil, the style, or the filament? It's the style. Correct. Yes. The style is an outgrowth of the ovary. It supports the stigma and collects pollen from the stamens. Part 3 now. It holds the ovules. This is the fat part of the pistil. What is it? The ovary. Correct. This is right. The ovary is the base part of the pistil and it holds the ovules. What about number 4? Number 4 are found inside the ovary. Are they the ovules or the pistil? They are the ovules. Well done. Let's move now to part 5. The stigma, style, ovary, the ovules inside the ovary, all of these parts make up the female part called the pistil or carpel. Well done. Number 6 right now. If you want, without reading, we can guess the part, right? Number 6 is the anther, correct? The anther is the part that holds the pollen, while number 7 is the filament that holds the anther. The anther with the filament make up the male part of the flower. And this part, is it called the petal, stamen, pistil? What is it called? The stamen. The stamen. is the main reproductive organ. What do we call the colorful part of the flower that attracts insects and pollinators? The number 9. It's the petal. Perfect, guys. Well done. What about conifers? Conifers are trees without flowers. They grow cones. Conifers are evergreen trees. They do not lose their leaves. And they have special kinds of leaves called needles. So their leaves stay green, do not fall, and look like needles. Conifers grow 2 types of cones: pollen cones and seed cones. Pollen cones' function is to produce pollen grains. Seed cones' function is to hold the seeds inside. Pollen grains must move from the pollen cone to the seed cone. When the pollen grain meets the female egg inside the seed cone, we will get seeds. Okay, this is pollination. When pollen grains are moved from the pollen cones to the seed cones, we say that pollination is happening. Who is the pollinator? It's the wind. What are different examples of conifers? General Sherman, spruce trees, pine trees, cedar trees, giant sequoias, and others. Flowering plants, conifers are seed plants. In the 3rd lesson, we're talking about mosses and ferns, which are non-seed plants. Mosses and ferns are non-seed plants, as I mentioned. Mosses are soft plants that love to grow in shady places. These plants are flowerless, they do not grow flowers, and they are seedless. They do not make or reproduce by seeds, but by spores. So again, mosses are soft plants with no true roots, no true leaves, no true stems. They do not grow flowers. They do not make seeds, but they make spores that help them reproduce. What about ferns? Ferns are also flowerless plants. They do not grow flowers. And we can know them easily by the shape of their leaves. Their leaves are made of fronds. And on the back, on the underside of the fronds, they grow spores. Spores are tiny, small organisms that leave the plant's body, and when a spore finds the moist place or the right place to grow, it will grow into a new moss plant or into a new fern plant. What about fungi? Fungi grow everywhere around us. And they have different colors, different shapes. A fungus does not belong to the plants kingdom nor to the animals kingdom. Fungi are fungi. They have their special group. Fungi do not have leaves, flowers, stems, or roots like plants do, but they have a cap, they have gills, they have a stem called a style, and roots that we call mycelial threads. Fungi do not make seeds, since they do not grow flowers for sure, but they have or they make spores. We can see the spores released from the fungi bodies. these spores will be carried by animals, by the wind, by the water to places where they can grow into new fungi. And that's it. At the end of this chapter, I want you to ask yourself these questions. If you were able to answer them, this means that you got and you understood everything. If you still have any questions about these lessons, don't hesitate. Please send me messages and I will re-explain for all of you and answer all of your questions. What do we mean by flowering plants? What do we mean by pollination? What are different parts of a flower? And what's the job of each one of these parts? How does a seed grow into a new plant? And how do plants make seeds? Can you talk a bit about a conifer tree? What are some characteristics of a conifer tree? What are some examples of conifers? Is there any difference between pollen cones and seed cones? Who is larger? Which one is larger? What are two examples of seed plants? What are two examples of non-seed plants? What are mosses and ferns? What are different parts of a mushroom? How do mosses, ferns, and mushrooms reproduce? Again, if you were able to answer all of my questions, this means that you did it. And I'm so proud of you. If you still didn't get it, don't hesitate, don't be shy, ask me. Bye bye.